The first thing she said wasn't hello. I'll work harder than any man you've got. Just don't ask me where I came from. The words hung in the cold morning air as every ranch hand stopped what they were doing. A young woman standing alone at the edge of a weather-beaten ranch was enough to draw attention. A young woman asking for work instead of charity was something none of them had seen before. Daniel Mercer studied her without speaking. Her dress was dusty from weeks on the trail. One sleeve had been stitched by hand with uneven thread. Her boots had nearly fallen apart. Yet she stood straight, refusing to lower her eyes. She looked exhausted. She also looked determined. "This isn't a boarding house," one of the ranch hands laughed. "We've got no need for a lady." She didn't even glance at him. "I'm not a lady." Daniel noticed the blistered palms wrapped in cloth. Those weren't the hands of someone pretending. "What can you do?" he finally asked. "Ride. Irrigate. Repair fences. Cook if I have to. And if none of that's enough." She swallowed. "I learn fast." Silence settled over the yard. Daniel had spent 15 years building Mercer Ranch after losing his father to fever and his mother to a hard winter. He trusted horses more than people and silence more than promises. Yet something about the stranger made him hesitate. "What do they call you?" "Emma." "No last name?" "It doesn't matter anymore." That answer should have sent her away. Instead, Daniel nodded toward the bunkhouse. "You'll earn your meals." The laughter from the ranch hands stopped immediately. One of them stepped closer. "Boss, she's trouble." Daniel never looked away from Emma. "Then she'll earn double." Emma's first week nearly broke her. She woke before sunrise. Worked until darkness. Collapsed into bed without enough strength to eat. She repaired broken gates. Carried heavy feed sacks. Learned every horse by name. When the men mocked her, she ignored them. When they tried to outwork her, she simply kept going. After 10 days, nobody laughed anymore. Daniel watched quietly. She never complained. Not once. Even when rain soaked her clothes. Even when she sliced her hand on barbed wire. Even when one of the older Mares threw her into the mud. She climbed back into the saddle every single time. One evening Daniel found her sitting beside the creek, washing blood from her knuckles. "You should have rested today." "I couldn't." "Why?" She smiled without looking at him. "People who stop moving usually get caught." Daniel frowned. "Caught by who?" Her smile disappeared. "I said too much." She stood and walked away before he could ask another question. Weeks passed. The ranch slowly changed. The cook noticed fresh wildflowers appearing in empty jars around the house. The horses seemed calmer. Even the oldest ranch hand admitted she'd repaired fences better than anyone else. Daniel found himself searching for her without realizing it. If she wasn't in the barn, she was in the fields. If she wasn't there, she'd be helping someone without asking for thanks. One afternoon Daniel spotted a frightened colt trapped beneath fallen timber after a storm. Before anyone else reached it, Emma crawled underneath the shattered beams. "Emma!" Daniel shouted. "The wood's unstable." She ignored him. The frightened animal kicked wildly. One hoof struck her shoulder hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Still she refused to leave. Slowly. Patiently. She whispered until the colt stopped fighting. Together they pulled it free. As soon as the horse stood safely again, Emma finally collapsed. Daniel rushed to her side. "You could have been killed." She laughed weakly. So could he. It was only a horse. Her expression changed. "No." It was scared. Daniel had no answer. That evening he brought soup to the small room she'd been given above the stable. You didn't have to. I know. She accepted the bowl. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. The silence somehow felt comfortable. Finally Daniel asked the question he'd been carrying for weeks. Who's waiting for you? No one. Parents? Gone. Husband? She almost dropped the spoon. No. Children? A tear escaped before she could stop it. Daniel immediately regretted asking. I'm sorry. She quickly wiped her face. You shouldn't be. It reminds me they're still real. He wanted to ask what she meant. Instead he simply sat beside the window while rain tapped softly against the roof. For the first time in years, neither of them felt completely alone. Summer arrived. The ranch flourished. So did something Daniel refused to name. He smiled more. The workers noticed. He whistled while repairing fences. The cook teased him endlessly. You've changed. I've gotten busier. No. She grinned. You've started looking toward the barn before breakfast. Daniel pretended not to hear. But she was right. Every morning his eyes searched for Emma before anything else. Emma noticed too. One evening they rode together across the western pasture. The sunset painted the sky in deep shades of gold and crimson. It's beautiful, she whispered. Daniel looked toward her instead of the horizon. Yeah. She caught him staring. What? Nothing. You were looking at me. I was. She laughed softly. You should probably stop. Why? Because people who look at me too long usually regret it. I don't think I will. For the first time. She looked afraid. Not of him. Of what his words might awaken inside her. Before she could answer, a rider appeared at the top of the hill. His horse was exhausted. His face was grim. He stopped only long enough to hand Daniel a folded paper. I was told to deliver this the moment I found Mercer Ranch. Daniel opened it. His expression froze. Slowly. He turned toward Emma. She had already gone pale. Because before he spoke a single word, she already knew who had finally found her. Emma's hands trembled before Daniel even unfolded the paper completely. She didn't ask what it said. She didn't have to. Some fears live inside a person so long that they arrive before the truth does. Daniel looked from the letter to her. It says a man named Henry Calloway has been asking about a young woman traveling alone. He claims she's his wife. The color drained from Emma's face. One of the ranch hands muttered, well. I guess mystery solved. Emma shook her head so quickly it almost looked painful. No. Daniel stepped closer. Is he lying? She closed her eyes. I was never his wife. The yard fell silent. The messenger cleared his throat. I was only paid to deliver the letter. Folks in Dry Creek say Calloway and 3 riders are heading this way. He tipped his hat and rode off. Daniel folded the paper slowly. You should tell me everything. Emma stared toward the distant hills. I can't. You have to. If I do, she whispered, you'll send me away. Daniel answered without hesitation. Try me. Tears filled her eyes. When I was 19, my father owed Henry Calloway more money than he could ever repay. Daniel already disliked where the story was heading. When father died, Henry said there was another way to settle the debt. She couldn't continue. Daniel finished the sentence in his own mind. They promised you. Emma nodded. He was nearly twice my age. I ran the night before the wedding. So he hunted you. For almost 2 years. Daniel's jaw tightened. He says I'm his wife because it sounds better than telling people he tried to buy me. No one spoke. Even the ranch hands who had doubted her lowered their eyes. Daniel folded the letter into his pocket. You aren't going anywhere. Emma looked at him in disbelief. You don't understand who he is. No. Daniel met her gaze. But he'll have to understand who I am. 3 days later they arrived. 4 riders. Expensive horses. Clean clothes that hadn't seen honest work in years. Henry Calloway smiled before he even dismounted. There you are. Emma instinctively stepped behind Daniel. Henry laughed. Still playing games? Daniel stood between them. She's staying. Henry's smile faded. You must be Mercer. I am. You've been sheltering stolen property. Daniel's voice stayed calm. She's neither. Henry pulled folded documents from his saddlebag. I've got contracts. I've got witnesses. I've got half the county willing to swear she's mine. Emma whispered, they're all men he pays. Henry ignored her. Daniel never reached for the papers. I don't care what's written. Henry frowned. You should. I care what she says. Emma looked up. No one had ever said those words for her. Not once. Henry stepped closer until only inches separated them. You'll regret this. Daniel answered quietly. I doubt it. For one dangerous second everyone expected gunfire. Instead Henry smiled. This isn't over. He climbed back into the saddle. As the riders disappeared beyond the ridge, Daniel noticed something. Henry wasn't angry. He looked confident. As though he'd already planned his next move. Life tried to return to normal. It couldn't. Emma jumped whenever horses approached. She stopped singing while she worked. She barely slept. Daniel found her sitting outside the barn long after midnight. You'll get sick. I keep hearing hoofbeats. He sat beside her. I'll keep watch. You need sleep. I've gone without it before. She smiled sadly. You're stubborn. So I've been told. After a long silence she whispered. Why are you doing this? Daniel looked toward the stars. Because somebody should have done it years ago. She reached for his hand before realizing what she'd done. Their fingers touched. Neither of them pulled away. For the first time since running from home. Emma felt safe. And for the first time since losing his family. Daniel realized the ranch no longer felt empty. Summer faded into autumn. Harvest filled every day with work. Laughter slowly returned. Emma smiled again. Daniel smiled because she did. Everyone noticed except the 2 people living it. One afternoon the cook cornered Daniel. You love her. Daniel nearly dropped the bucket he was carrying. I never said that. You didn't have to. I'm her employer. You're a fool. He laughed despite himself. What if she leaves? The old woman softened. Then tell her before she does. That evening Daniel found Emma repairing a broken saddle. I've got something to ask. She looked up. You sound nervous. I am. She waited. When winter comes. He cleared his throat. I was wondering if. The words refused to come. Emma smiled. You've faced stampedes with less fear. He laughed. I know. He took a deep breath. I don't want you to leave. Her smile slowly disappeared. I wasn't planning to. I mean ever. She stared at him. The world seemed to stop. Then. A rifle cracked through the valley. The stable window exploded beside them. Glass scattered across the floor. Someone outside shouted. They're back. Chaos swallowed the ranch. Horses screamed. Men reached for rifles. Another shot struck the water barrel, sending splinters through the yard. Daniel grabbed Emma's hand. "Stay inside." She pulled away. "I'm not hiding." "You are if I tell you to." She looked him straight in the eyes. "I've spent 2 years running. I'm done." Daniel realized arguing would waste precious seconds. They rushed outside together. Henry Calloway sat on horseback beyond the gate with nearly a dozen armed riders. This time he hadn't come to talk. He'd come to take. Henry smiled across the distance. "I warned you." Daniel stepped forward. "You've got no business here." "I've got unfinished business." Emma moved beside Daniel instead of behind him. Henry noticed. His smile vanished. "So that's how it is." He looked at Emma. "You've forgotten where you belong." She raised her voice so every ranch hand could hear. "I never belonged to you." Henry's face hardened. "You'll regret saying that." "I already regret staying silent." The words hit harder than any bullet. Several of Henry's own riders exchanged uncertain glances. Daniel saw it too. Henry wasn't followed by loyal men. Only hired ones. Henry lifted a rifle. "Last chance." Daniel didn't move. "So is this yours?" The silence stretched. Then Henry fired. The bullet struck the ranch sign, shattering the painted letters. The fight exploded. Gunfire echoed across the valley. Men dove behind wagons. Horses broke loose from their pens. Smoke rolled through the yard. Emma helped drag an injured ranch hand behind cover before reloading his rifle. Daniel caught sight of her. Instead of fear, he felt pride. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was protecting the people she loved. The battle lasted only minutes. But it felt like hours. When Henry realized 2 of his men had fled and the others were losing heart, he called for retreat. Before riding away, he pointed directly at Daniel. "This ends with one of us in the ground." Then he disappeared into the dust. The ranch stood battered and scarred. Buildings had been hit. Several men were wounded. One horse had been lost. As everyone began cleaning up, Daniel found Emma standing alone beside the broken ranch sign. She was crying. "I brought this here." He gently turned her toward him. "No. They came because of me. They came because evil men always need someone else to blame." She buried her face against his chest. For the first time. He wrapped his arms around her. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. But neither of them noticed the frightened ranch hand watching from the shadows. Or the fact that, later that night, he quietly saddled his horse. And rode in the same direction Henry Calloway had gone. The ranch had barely begun to heal when Daniel realized someone had betrayed them. At sunrise, old Samuel rode in from the northern pasture with worry written across his face. "The cattle are gone." Daniel frowned. Gone? Driven east during the night. Every man on the ranch knew what that meant. Someone had opened the gates from the inside. Emma watched Daniel's face harden. Who would do that? Before he could answer, they noticed one bunk in the ranch house was empty. Tom. The youngest ranch hand. The same frightened young man who had watched Daniel hold Emma after the attack. Samuel cursed under his breath. "He sold us." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. "No." He was scared. Samuel shook his head. Fear and betrayal often ride the same horse. Daniel saddled his gelding without another word. "I'm bringing our cattle home." Emma grabbed her rifle. "So am I." He looked at her. "This could turn ugly." "It already has." Their eyes met. For the first time, neither of them tried to hide what was growing between them. They rode together. By sunset they found the stolen herd in a narrow canyon. Henry Calloway's men had camped beside the trail, believing no one would find them before morning. Daniel counted the riders. 8. Too many for a direct fight. Then he saw Tom. The young ranch hand sat beside the fire with his hands tied. Emma whispered, "They tricked him." Daniel nodded. "I figured." Tom looked terrified. Henry laughed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You thought I'd trust a scared boy?" One of the outlaws shoved Tom into the dirt. "You've outlived your usefulness." Daniel's jaw tightened. Emma touched his arm. "We can't leave him." "We won't." They waited until darkness covered the canyon. Then they slipped between the rocks without making a sound. Emma reached Tom first. She cut the ropes around his wrists. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears running down his face. "I didn't mean." "I know. I thought if I told him where you'd be. He promised nobody would get hurt." Emma smiled sadly. Men like Henry always promised the wrong things. Tom broke down crying. Daniel handed him a horse. "Ride." "What about you?" "We'll catch up." Tom hesitated. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Go." The boy disappeared into the darkness. Only one thing remained. Getting the cattle home. Unfortunately, Henry had already heard the horse. The canyon exploded with shouting. "There they are." Gunfire echoed between the cliffs. Daniel and Emma sprinted toward the herd as bullets shattered stone around them. Daniel fired once, knocking a rifle from an outlaw's hands. Emma slapped the lead steer hard across its shoulder. The frightened animal charged forward. Within seconds the entire herd thundered through the canyon. Hundreds of pounding hooves turned dust into a blinding wall. The outlaws scattered in every direction. Daniel grabbed Emma's hand. "Move." They barely escaped being trampled. By the time the dust settled, the cattle were gone. Most of Henry's men were chasing them. Only Henry remained. Standing 20 feet away. Rifle raised. He smiled. "I finally got you alone." Daniel slowly stepped in front of Emma. Henry laughed. "Still protecting her?" Daniel answered quietly. "Always." Henry aimed directly at Daniel's heart. Emma's voice trembled. "Daniel." He never looked away from Henry. "If anything happens." "No. Listen to me." She shook her head desperately. "I'm not saying goodbye." He smiled. "You won't have to." Henry pulled the trigger. A shot rang through the canyon. Daniel remained standing. For one impossible second no one understood why. Then Henry looked down. A dark stain spread across his own shirt. He staggered backward. Old Samuel lowered the smoking rifle from the ridge above. "I figured you'd need an old man's bad aim." Henry dropped to his knees. He looked at Emma one last time. "You should've." The rest of the sentence never came. He fell face first into the dust. The man who had stolen years of her life never stood again. Emma didn't feel victory. Only relief. A weight she'd carried for so long simply disappeared. She turned toward Daniel. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him. And neither of them let go. But Daniel suddenly winced. Emma stepped back. There was blood on his side. A bullet had found him after all. And before he could say a single reassuring word, his knees gave way beneath him. "Daniel." Emma caught him before he hit the ground. "No, no, stay with me." He tried to smile, but pain stole the strength from his face. It's only a scratch. She pressed both hands against the wound. Don't lie to me. Old Samuel hurried down from the ridge, his horse nearly sliding over the loose rocks. We have to get him home. Now. The ride back to Mercer Ranch felt longer than every mile Emma had traveled over the past 2 years. She held Daniel upright in the saddle, whispering to him the entire way. You promised. His eyes barely opened. I know. You promised I wouldn't have to say goodbye. I remember. So don't make me. He reached weakly for her hand. I'm trying. The ranch doctor arrived before midnight. Everyone waited outside the house. No one spoke. The cook sat with folded hands, silently praying. Tom paced back and forth, blaming himself for everything. Samuel finally stopped him. You made a mistake. Tom lowered his head. I almost got him killed. Samuel rested a weathered hand on the boy's shoulder. And now you'll spend the rest of your life making sure your next choice is the right one. Hours passed. The front door finally opened. The doctor removed his spectacles and smiled. He's going to live. The entire porch seemed to breathe again. Emma covered her face as tears poured through her fingers. Not tears of fear. Tears of gratitude. Daniel needed weeks to recover. For the first time in years, he couldn't work. The man who had never learned how to rest had no choice. Emma became his stubborn nurse. She changed bandages. Read aloud from old newspapers. Argued with him every time he tried to get out of bed too early. You'll tear the stitches. I've got fences waiting. The fences can wait. The horses. The horses have survived without you for 3 weeks. He sighed dramatically. I've become completely useless. She laughed. No. You've simply discovered what everyone else already knew. And what's that? Sometimes strong people need someone to lean on. He looked at her for a long moment. I don't mind leaning on you. Her cheeks turned pink. You'd better get used to it. Winter arrived quietly. Snow covered the hills surrounding Mercer Ranch. The world looked softer somehow. Peaceful. One evening Daniel finally walked to the old oak tree overlooking the valley. Emma found him there. You shouldn't be out in the cold. I'm waiting for someone. She smiled. Who? You. She walked beside him. The valley below was silent except for the distant sound of horses settling into their barns. Daniel reached into his coat. I've never been good with speeches. You've mentioned. I spent years believing work was enough. He looked into her eyes. Then you rode into my life asking for a job. She laughed through unexpected tears. Worst job interview I've ever had. It was. And yet. He opened his hand. Inside rested a simple silver ring that had belonged to his mother. I've spent every day since hoping you'd never leave. Emma couldn't speak. I don't have fancy words. I don't have a mansion. I don't even have a piano that stays in tune. She laughed again. What I do have. He took her hand. Is a home. And if you'll let me. I'd like it to become yours too. Tears rolled freely down her face. For so many years she had belonged to fear. To running. To memories she wished she could forget. Now, for the first time in her life. Someone wasn't asking to own her. Someone was asking to walk beside her. She nodded. Yes. One word. Soft. Certain. Beautiful. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger. If they asked why, Daniel would simply smile. They remind my wife that no matter how long the road has been, everyone deserves a place where they are finally safe. Emma would squeeze his hand every time he said it. Because she knew those words weren't only meant for strangers. They were meant for the frightened young woman who had once arrived with nothing but worn-out boots, blistered hands, and a heart too broken to believe in tomorrow. She had come looking for work. Instead, she found the kind of love that didn't ask where she'd been. It simply promised she would never have to face the road alone again. She wrapped both arms around him, careful of the healing wound. "I love you," she whispered. The words settled into the quiet winter air like they had always belonged there. Daniel smiled. "I loved you long before I knew how to say it." They stood together as snow drifted across the valley, covering the scars left by a hard season. In the spring, the ranch bloomed brighter than anyone could remember. Tom stayed and became one of Daniel's most trusted hands, proving that one mistake did not have to define a lifetime. Old Samuel finally retired, though he still visited every Sunday just to complain about how young people ran a ranch. The cook filled the house with laughter, insisting every room sounded better now that two people argued over whose turn it was to make coffee. And every now and then, travelers passing Mercer Ranch would notice fresh wildflowers resting in old glass jars on the porch.